The morning sun cast long shadows across the military academy courtyard as Sarah Martinez adjusted her cadet uniform for what felt like the 100th time. At 22, she was older than most of the other cadets, having spent 4 years working construction jobs to save money for college before deciding to pursue her dream of military service. The fabric felt stiff against her shoulders, still bearing the creases from the packaging, unlike the worn-in uniforms of her classmates who had grown up dreaming of this moment. Sarah had always been different from her peers. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Phoenix, Arizona, she was raised by her grandmother Rosa after her parents died in a car accident when she was 8. Rosa worked double shifts at a local diner to keep food on the table and had taught Sarah the value of hard work and perseverance. While other kids played video games after school, Sarah was fixing broken appliances, helping neighbors with yard work, or studying under the dim light of their small kitchen table. Her decision to join the military hadn't come easily. Sarah had watched the news coverage of various conflicts around the world and felt a deep calling to serve her country. But, more than that, she wanted to prove that someone from her background could excel in an environment traditionally dominated by those from military families or prestigious backgrounds. Rosa had been skeptical at first, worried about losing the only family she had left, but eventually came to support Sarah's dream wholeheartedly. The academy was everything Sarah had imagined, and more intimidating than she had prepared for. The buildings stood like monuments to military tradition, with their red brick facades and gleaming windows that reflected the movements of hundreds of cadets going about their daily routines. American flags snapped in the crisp morning breeze, and the sound of marching boots echoed across the concrete pathways like a rhythmic heartbeat. From her first day, Sarah noticed the invisible social hierarchies that existed among the cadets. There were the legacy kids, whose fathers and grandfathers had attended the same academy, wearing their family traditions like invisible badges of honor. They moved with an easy confidence, knew all the unwritten rules, and seemed to speak in a language of military acronyms and inside jokes that Sarah was still learning to decode. Then, there were the scholarship students like herself, who worked twice as hard to prove they belonged. Sarah quickly learned to identify them by their intense focus during classes, their perfectly maintained equipment, and the way they studied late into the night when others were socializing in the common areas. They carried themselves with determination, but also with the subtle anxiety of knowing they had fewer safety nets if they failed. Sarah's roommate, Jennifer Walsh, came from a long line of military officers. Her father was a decorated colonel, her older brother was serving overseas, and she had spent her childhood on various military bases around the world. Jennifer was pleasant enough, but Sarah could sense the polite distance she maintained, as if she wasn't quite sure what to make of someone who had learned about military life from books rather than dinner-table conversations. The academic coursework was rigorous but manageable for Sarah, who had developed strong study habits during her years of night classes at community college. Military history, strategic studies, leadership theory. She absorbed it all with the hunger of someone who knew this opportunity might not come again. Her professors noted her thoughtful contributions to class discussions and her ability to see problems from unique angles, though some of her classmates seemed less impressed by her insights. Physical training was where Sarah truly began to stand out, though not always in ways that earned her popularity. Years of construction work had given her a lean, functional strength that served her well during obstacle courses and endurance runs. While other cadets struggled with heavy equipment drills, Sarah's experience with power tools and manual labor made her a natural. She could carry heavy packs longer distances, scale walls more efficiently, and maintain her energy levels during extended field exercises. However, her practical background also set her apart in ways that sometimes drew unwanted attention. During weapons training, while other cadets fumbled with the technical aspects of firearms maintenance, Sarah's mechanical aptitude allowed her to quickly master the intricacies of cleaning and repairing various weapons systems. Her instructors praised her natural talent, but some of her peers began to whisper that she was trying too hard to impress everyone. The social dynamics of academy life proved more challenging than any academic or physical requirement. Meal times in the dining hall became exercises in careful navigation, as Sarah learned which tables were welcoming and which were closed circles of established friendships. She often found herself eating with other scholarship students or sitting alone with a book, preferring solitude to the feeling of being an outsider trying to break into conversations about ski trips to Aspen or summer homes in the Hamptons. Weekend leave policies allowed cadets to venture into the nearby town, but Sarah rarely joined these excursions. While her classmates talked about expensive restaurants and shopping trips, Sarah used her limited free time to video call with Rosa, who always wanted to hear every detail about academy life. These conversations grounded her and reminded her why she was pushing through the challenges, even when the social isolation felt overwhelming. The military training scenarios grew more complex as the semester progressed, and Sarah began to excel in areas that surprised even her instructors. During simulated combat exercises, her ability to think creatively under pressure set her apart from cadets who relied on textbook solutions. She had an intuitive understanding of tactics and could adapt quickly when situations changed unexpectedly. Her performance evaluations consistently ranked in the top 10% of her class, though she noticed that academic excellence didn't automatically translate into social acceptance. One particularly challenging exercise involved a multi-day field training event where cadets were divided into competing teams and tasked with completing various objectives while facing simulated enemy resistance. Sarah found herself assigned to a team led by Marcus Henderson, whose father was a 3-star general and who carried himself with the casual authority of someone accustomed to being in charge. The team also included Jennifer and several other cadets from prominent military families. During the planning phase, Sarah suggested an unconventional approach to one of their objectives that would involve using the terrain to their advantage in a way that wasn't covered in their standard tactical manuals. Her idea was based on problem-solving techniques she had learned in construction work, where sometimes the best solution required thinking outside established procedures. Marcus listened politely, but ultimately dismissed her suggestion in favor of a more traditional approach that aligned with what they had studied in class. The exercise didn't go as planned for their team. The conventional tactics they employed were easily anticipated by their opponents, and they found themselves outmaneuvered at several key moments. Meanwhile, Sarah watched as other teams implemented creative strategies similar to what she had proposed, achieving their objectives with fewer resources and less time. The frustration of knowing she had seen a better path, but being unable to influence the decision-making process was a familiar feeling from her civilian work experiences. After their team's poor performance, some members began to question Marcus's leadership choices, but rather than acknowledging Sarah's earlier suggestion, they focused on tactical errors and equipment issues. Sarah remained quiet during the debriefing sessions, having learned that pointing out missed opportunities rarely made her more popular with her teammates. Instead, she took notes on what had worked for other teams and how she might apply those lessons in future scenarios. The semester continued with a steady rhythm of classes, training exercises, and gradual skill development. Sarah's professors began to recognize her analytical abilities and often called on her to offer different perspectives during strategic planning discussions. She had a talent for identifying weaknesses in plans that others missed and could propose solutions that drew from her diverse background experiences. However, this academic recognition seemed to create even more distance between her and some of her peers. During evening study sessions in the library, Sarah often observed the informal networks that formed among her classmates. Information about upcoming tests, insights from upperclassmen, and tips for impressing certain instructors flowed freely within these social circles. Sarah was occasionally included in these exchanges, but she could sense that her participation was tolerated rather than welcomed. She learned to rely more heavily on her own preparation and research, spending long hours in the library stacks reading military biographies and case studies that weren't assigned for class. The isolation wasn't entirely negative, however. Sarah's independent study habits led her to discover historical examples of unconventional military strategies that fascinated her. She read about special operations units, asymmetric warfare tactics, and the role of intelligence gathering in modern conflicts. These subjects weren't part of the standard curriculum, but provided her with knowledge that would prove valuable in unexpected ways. As winter approached and the semester neared its end, Sarah had established herself as a capable cadet who excelled academically and physically while remaining somewhat of an outsider socially. Her instructors respected her work ethic and unconventional thinking, but she still felt like she was watching academy life from the periphery rather than fully participating in it. The upcoming winter break would give her time to return home to Rosa and reflect on whether she truly belonged in this environment or if she should consider alternative paths for her future. The final weeks of the semester brought comprehensive examinations and practical assessments that would determine class rankings and summer training assignments. Sarah approached these challenges with the same methodical preparation that had carried her through previous obstacles, but she couldn't shake the feeling that success in the classroom and training exercises might not be enough to earn the respect and acceptance she sought from her peers and instructors. The second semester brought new challenges and opportunities that would test Sarah in ways she hadn't anticipated. Winter break had been a much-needed respite, spending time with Rosa and working part-time at a local auto repair shop to help with expenses. The familiar rhythm of diagnostic work and mechanical problem-solving had reminded her of her strengths and renewed her determination to succeed at the academy. Returning to campus in January, Sarah noticed subtle changes in the atmosphere. The cadets who had struggled during their first semester were either gone or clearly fighting to stay afloat, while those who remained had developed a harder edge of competitiveness. The social dynamics had solidified into more defined groups, and Sarah found herself even more clearly positioned as an outsider, though she had earned a grudging respect for her consistent academic and physical performance. The new semester introduced advanced tactical studies and leadership rotations where cadets would take turns commanding their peers in various scenarios. These exercises were designed to identify natural leaders and test decision-making abilities under pressure. Sarah approached her first leadership assignment with careful preparation, studying the profiles of her team members and developing contingency plans for multiple scenarios. When her turn came to lead a squad-level exercise, Sarah found herself in command of 8 other cadets, including Marcus Henderson and 2 other legacy students who had previously dismissed her suggestions. The scenario involved securing and defending a strategic position while coordinating with other units to complete a broader mission objective. Sarah had noticed patterns in previous exercises where traditional approaches often failed because they were too predictable, so she developed a plan that incorporated elements of deception and misdirection. During the planning briefing, she presented her strategy with confidence, but also invited input from her team members. Marcus questioned several aspects of her plan, particularly the unconventional positioning of defensive elements that seemed to violate standard doctrine. Sarah calmly explained her reasoning, using examples from military history and pointing out weaknesses in more conventional approaches that their opponents would likely exploit. The exercise itself was a revelation for everyone involved. Sarah's team not only completed their primary objectives ahead of schedule, but also provided crucial support to adjacent units that were struggling with their assignments. Her innovative use of terrain and timing created opportunities that the opposition hadn't anticipated, and the overall mission was completed with minimal losses and maximum efficiency. The success of her leadership exercise marked a turning point in how some of her peers viewed her capabilities. Marcus approached her afterward with genuine interest in understanding her tactical thinking, admitting that his initial skepticism had been misplaced. Other cadets began asking for her input on their own planning exercises, and Sarah found herself gradually being included in study groups and informal strategy discussions. However, not everyone was pleased with Sarah's growing reputation. A group of cadets led by Victoria Pemberton, whose father was a prominent Pentagon official, seemed to view Sarah's success as somehow diminishing their own prospects. Victoria had always been accustomed to being at the center of Academy's social life, and Sarah's rise threatened the established hierarchy that had favored those with the right family connections. The tension came to a head during a joint training exercise that involved multiple classes and would be observed by senior military officials visiting the academy. The scenario was complex, involving coordination between different military branches and requiring sophisticated planning and execution. Cadets were assigned to various roles based on their academic performance and leadership evaluations, with the most prestigious positions going to those who had demonstrated exceptional capabilities. Sarah was selected as a planning coordinator, a role that would require her to work closely with representatives from each participating unit to develop an integrated strategy. It was a significant responsibility and recognition of her analytical abilities, but it also placed her in a position where any failures would be highly visible to the Academy leadership and visiting officials. Victoria had been assigned as the overall mission commander, a position she had expected to receive and felt she deserved based on her family background and social standing within the Academy. However, the selection process had been based purely on merit, and the evaluating officers had chosen her for her organizational abilities rather than her tactical innovation. This created an interesting dynamic where Victoria's authority was formal while Sarah's influence was based on the respect she had earned through demonstrated competence. The planning phase revealed significant philosophical differences in their approaches to military leadership. Victoria favored hierarchical decision-making and adherence to established protocols, believing that discipline and order were the foundations of effective military operations. Sarah, while respecting the importance of structure, also valued creative problem-solving and adaptability, arguing that rigid adherence to doctrine could be exploited by intelligent adversaries. These differences became apparent during planning meetings where Sarah would propose innovative solutions to tactical challenges, only to have Victoria override them in favor of more conventional approaches. Sarah found herself in the difficult position of having to implement strategies she believed were suboptimal while maintaining her professional demeanor and supporting Victoria's authority as mission commander. The exercise itself took place over a week-long period and involved scenarios that tested every aspect of their military training. Sarah watched with growing concern as their conventional tactics proved vulnerable to the adaptive strategies employed by their opponents, who were upperclassmen with more experience and a mandate to challenge the underclassmen's assumptions. By the third day, their unit was falling behind in achieving key objectives, and morale was beginning to suffer among the participating cadets. Victoria held a leadership meeting where she asked for input on how to improve their performance, and Sarah saw an opportunity to propose modifications to their strategy that could help them adapt to the evolving situation. Sarah's suggestions involved redistributing resources to exploit weaknesses she had observed in their opponent's positioning and adjusting their timeline to create opportunities for coordinated strikes when the opposition least expected them. Her analysis was thorough and well-reasoned, drawing on intelligence gathered from previous engagements and incorporating lessons learned from their early failures. Victoria listened to the presentation, but remained skeptical, particularly about suggestions that deviated significantly from their original plan. She was concerned about the risk of implementing untested strategies in front of senior evaluators and preferred to execute their existing plan more efficiently rather than making fundamental changes that could backfire spectacularly. The debate that followed revealed deeper tensions within their leadership team. Some cadets supported Sarah's innovative approach, having witnessed her tactical successes in previous exercises, while others sided with Victoria's more conservative strategy, believing that consistent execution of proven methods was less risky than experimental tactics. Sarah found herself arguing passionately for her position, not because she needed to be right, but because she genuinely believed that their current approach was leading toward failure and that the cadets under their command deserved better leadership. Her emotional investment in the success of their mission was evident, and several team members began to see her not as someone trying to undermine Victoria's authority, but as someone who cared deeply about the welfare of their entire unit. Eventually, Victoria agreed to implement modified versions of some of Sarah's suggestions, though she insisted on maintaining overall strategic control and limiting the scope of the tactical changes. It was a compromise that neither woman was entirely satisfied with, but it represented progress toward a more collaborative approach to leadership that would benefit their entire unit. The final days of the exercise saw improved performance from their team as the modified strategies began to produce results. Their opponents had to adapt to unexpected tactics, creating opportunities that their unit was able to exploit effectively. While they didn't achieve a complete victory, their performance improved dramatically compared to the early phases of the exercise. The after-action review conducted by senior officials was particularly interesting for Sarah, as several evaluators specifically noted the tactical adaptations that had occurred midway through the exercise. They praised the leadership team's ability to learn from early setbacks and implement effective changes, though they also observed that better initial planning might have prevented some of the problems they had to overcome. Sarah's role in the strategic modifications was acknowledged publicly during the review, earning her recognition from Academy officials and visiting military officers. Several evaluators specifically mentioned her analytical capabilities and innovative thinking as examples of the kind of adaptive leadership the military needed in modern conflicts. This recognition marked another significant step in Sarah's journey from outsider to respected member of her class. The success of the joint exercise had demonstrated her value as both a tactical thinker and a collaborative leader, earning her the respect of peers who had previously dismissed her contributions. However, the increased attention also brought new challenges. Sarah found herself under greater scrutiny from instructors who wanted to understand her unconventional approach to military problems, and she faced higher expectations in subsequent exercises and assignments. The pressure to continue performing at an exceptional level was both motivating and stressful, particularly as she prepared for the summer training programs that would determine her future career path within the military. Summer arrived with an intensity that matched the rigorous training program Sarah had been selected for. The Advanced Leadership and Tactical Studies program was reserved for the top 10% of cadets and involved 6 weeks of intensive field exercises designed to push participants beyond their comfort zones. Sarah felt a mixture of pride and anxiety as she prepared for what many considered the most challenging aspect of their academy education. The program took place at a remote training facility in the mountains of Colorado, where the thin air and rugged terrain would add additional layers of difficulty to already complex scenarios. Sarah packed her gear with the same methodical attention to detail that had served her well throughout her academy career, double-checking every piece of equipment and reviewing the preliminary materials that had been provided about their upcoming challenges. The other cadets selected for the program represented the elite of their respective classes, including several who had initially doubted Sarah's capabilities but had come to respect her tactical acumen. Marcus Henderson was among the participants, as was Victoria Pemberton, creating a dynamic that carried forward the tensions and relationships that had developed during the previous semester. The first week of training focused on individual skills assessment, where each cadet was tested on various competencies ranging from marksmanship and navigation to psychological resilience and decision-making under extreme stress. Sarah approached these challenges with the same steady determination that had characterized her entire academy experience, though she couldn't help but notice that the standards were significantly higher than anything she had previously encountered. The marksmanship evaluations revealed Sarah's natural talent with firearms, a skill that had developed during hunting trips with Rose's brother during her teenage years. While other cadets struggled with the precision required for long-range targets, Sarah's steady hands and patient breathing technique allowed her to achieve scores that impressed even the veteran instructors conducting the assessments. Navigation exercises tested their ability to move efficiently through unfamiliar terrain using only basic equipment and their training in map reading and compass use. Sarah's experience with construction work had given her an intuitive understanding of topography and spatial relationships that served her well during these challenges. She consistently completed courses faster than projected times while maintaining accuracy in reaching designated waypoints. The psychological evaluations were more challenging, involving scenarios designed to test decision-making abilities under extreme stress and moral pressure. Cadets were presented with simulated situations where they had to make rapid choices with incomplete information, often involving trade-offs between competing priorities such as mission accomplishment and personnel safety. One particularly difficult scenario placed Sarah in command of a reconnaissance team that had discovered intelligence about an imminent enemy attack on friendly forces. However, transmitting this information would reveal their position and likely result in casualties among her team members, while remaining silent would allow the attack to proceed with devastating consequences for the larger friendly force. Sarah approached the problem by analyzing the tactical situation from multiple angles, considering not only the immediate consequences of each choice, but also the broader strategic implications. She developed a solution that involved partial disclosure of the intelligence through coded communications that would alert friendly forces without revealing the exact source of the information, allowing her team to reposition while still providing crucial warning. The instructors evaluating her response were impressed not only with the tactical soundness of her decision, but also with the ethical framework she used to balance competing priorities. Her ability to find creative solutions that minimized negative consequences while still achieving mission objectives marked her as someone with the intellectual flexibility needed for complex leadership roles. As the individual assessments concluded, Sarah found herself ranked among the top performers in almost every category. Her overall evaluation placed her in the top 5% of participants, earning her selection for the program's most challenging component, a 2-week field exercise that would simulate extended combat operations under realistic conditions. The field exercise divided participants into competing forces and tasked them with conducting sophisticated operations in a large geographic area under the observation of experienced military personnel. Sarah was assigned to a unit led by Captain Rodriguez, a decorated special operations officer who had been brought in specifically to evaluate the cadets' performance under realistic combat conditions. Captain Rodriguez was unlike the academy instructors Sarah had worked with previously. His approach to leadership was informal but demanding, emphasizing results over protocol and encouraging innovative thinking while maintaining strict standards for execution. During their initial briefing, he made it clear that he was interested in identifying cadets who could adapt and excel in the unpredictable environment of real military operations. Sarah's unit was assigned a series of objectives that would require them to operate independently behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence, and conducting limited sabotage operations while avoiding detection and capture. The scenarios were designed to test not only their tactical skills, but also their ability to work as a cohesive team under sustained pressure. The first few days of the exercise went smoothly as Sarah's unit successfully completed their initial objectives using conventional tactics and careful planning. However, Captain Rodriguez gradually increased the complexity and intensity of their missions, introducing unexpected complications that forced them to adapt their strategies on the fly. During one particularly challenging mission, Sarah's team was tasked with gathering intelligence from a heavily defended enemy position, while another unit created a diversion elsewhere. The original plan called for a straightforward reconnaissance approach, but Sarah noticed vulnerabilities in the enemy's positioning that could be exploited more effectively using unconventional methods. She proposed an alternative approach that would involve infiltrating the position using maintenance access routes she had identified from studying the facility's blueprints. The plan was riskier than the original strategy, but offered the potential for gathering more detailed intelligence while reducing the likelihood of detection. Captain Rodriguez listened to her proposal with interest, asking probing questions about the tactical assumptions underlying her analysis and the contingency plans she had developed for various scenarios. After a thorough discussion, he approved the modified mission plan, though he made it clear that Sarah would bear responsibility for the outcome. The mission was executed flawlessly, with Sarah's team not only gathering the required intelligence, but also discovering additional information about enemy capabilities that proved valuable for subsequent operations. Their success demonstrated the effectiveness of adaptive tactics and reinforced Captain Rodriguez's growing impression that Sarah possessed the kind of innovative thinking that distinguished exceptional military leaders. Word of Sarah's tactical successes began to spread among the instructors and evaluating officers, who took note of her ability to identify opportunities that others missed and develop effective solutions under pressure. Her reputation as a creative problem solver grew throughout the exercise, earning her increasing responsibilities and more challenging assignments. However, success also brought unwanted attention from some of her fellow cadets who felt that her innovations reflected poorly on their own more conventional approaches. Victoria Pemberton, in particular, seemed frustrated by Sarah's growing prominence and made several subtle attempts to undermine her contributions during group planning sessions. The tension came to a head during the final phase of the exercise, when participants were divided into larger units for a complex multi-day operation that would test their ability to coordinate sophisticated missions involving multiple objectives and competing priorities. Sarah found herself assigned as a senior planning officer for an operation that would require careful coordination between different tactical elements. The mission involved simultaneous attacks on multiple targets, with success dependent on precise timing and effective communication between dispersed units. Sarah's role was to develop the overall tactical plan and coordinate its execution, working closely with unit commanders who would be responsible for implementing specific components of the operation. During the planning phase, Sarah identified several potential points of failure in the proposed strategy and developed contingency plans to address various scenarios that could disrupt their coordination. Her analysis revealed that the conventional approach favored by some of her colleagues was vulnerable to the kind of adaptive responses their opponents had demonstrated throughout the exercise. Sarah proposed modifications to the timing and sequencing of their attacks that would create multiple dilemmas for their opponents while maintaining flexibility for their own forces to adapt as situations developed. Her plan was more complex than the alternatives, but offered better prospects for achieving their objectives while minimizing risks to personnel. The debate over tactical approaches that followed revealed fundamental differences in military philosophy between Sarah and some of her peers. While she advocated for adaptive strategies that could respond to changing conditions, others preferred more straightforward approaches that relied on superior execution of proven methods. Captain Rodriguez observed these discussions with interest, occasionally asking questions that forced participants to defend their positions with detailed analysis rather than general principles. He seemed particularly interested in how different cadets approached the challenge of balancing innovation with reliability, recognizing that both qualities were essential for effective military leadership. The final operation was scheduled to take place over 3 days and would determine the overall rankings for the summer program. Sarah understood that her performance would significantly influence her future career opportunities and approached the challenge with the same careful preparation that had characterized her entire academy experience. As the exercise began, Sarah found herself in the nerve-wracking position of having her tactical plan tested under realistic conditions while being observed by some of the most experienced military officers she had ever encountered. The pressure was intense, but she drew strength from her confidence in the thorough analysis and preparation that had gone into developing their strategy. The final operation unfolded with the precision and intensity that Sarah had anticipated, but also with unexpected complications that would test every aspect of her training and character. As dawn broke over the Colorado mountains, her tactical plan was set in motion with units moving toward their assigned objectives, while she coordinated from a central command position equipped with communication equipment that would allow her to monitor and adjust their strategy as events developed. The first few hours proceeded according to plan, with each unit reporting successful completion of preliminary objectives and maintaining their assigned timeline for the coordinated assault phase. Sarah monitored radio communications carefully, tracking the progress of each element while remaining alert for signs of enemy adaptation that might require tactical adjustments. However, as the operation entered its critical phase, one of their units encountered unexpected resistance that threatened to disrupt the entire timeline. The enemy force had repositioned during the night, creating a defensive configuration that hadn't been anticipated in their intelligence reports. The unit commander requested immediate support and guidance on how to proceed without compromising the broader mission. Sarah found herself facing exactly the kind of crisis that separated competent planners from exceptional leaders. She had 30 seconds to analyze the new situation, evaluate multiple response options, and issue orders that would determine the success or failure of their entire operation. The weight of responsibility was enormous, particularly given that Captain Rodriguez and other senior officers were monitoring every aspect of her decision-making process. Drawing on her extensive preparation and tactical analysis, Sarah quickly identified 3 possible responses to the unexpected resistance. The conventional approach would involve redirecting forces from other objectives to provide direct support, but this would weaken their position elsewhere and might trigger a cascade of complications. Alternatively, they could abort the affected portion of the mission and proceed with reduced objectives, maintaining security but sacrificing potential gains. Sarah chose a third option that reflected her innovative approach to tactical challenges. She directed the encountering unit to implement a modified assault plan that would exploit weaknesses she had identified in the enemy's hasty repositioning, while simultaneously adjusting the timeline for other units to create additional pressure that would prevent the enemy from concentrating their response. The modified plan required precise coordination and split-second timing, with multiple units adjusting their approaches simultaneously to maintain the element of surprise while supporting each other's objectives. Sarah's voice remained calm and confident as she transmitted the necessary orders, though her heart was racing as she realized that any miscalculation could result in mission failure under the observation of the Academy's most senior evaluators. The next 20 minutes were the most intense of Sarah's military career to that point. Radio communications crackled with updates from unit commanders as they adapted to the new plan while maintaining operational security. Sarah tracked their progress using maps and status boards, making minor adjustments as necessary while resisting the temptation to micromanage commanders who were executing complex maneuvers under pressure. When the final assault commenced, Sarah's modifications proved to be precisely calibrated. The enemy force found itself facing coordinated attacks from unexpected directions at moments when their defensive positioning was most vulnerable. The operation achieved all primary objectives ahead of schedule, with minimal simulated casualties and maximum intelligence gathering. Captain Rodriguez's immediate response was a simple nod of approval, but Sarah could see in his expression that something significant had just occurred. The other evaluating officers were engaged in intense discussion, reviewing communication logs and tactical decisions with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for actual combat operations rather than training exercises. The formal debrief that followed was unlike anything Sarah had experienced during her academy career. Senior officers from multiple branches of the military participated in a detailed analysis of the operation, focusing particularly on the tactical adaptations that had been implemented during the crisis phase. Sarah found herself answering sophisticated questions about her decision-making process, risk assessment, and coordination methodology. One colonel asked specifically about her ability to maintain situational awareness while simultaneously coordinating multiple elements under extreme time pressure. Another inquired about the analytical framework she used to identify tactical opportunities in rapidly changing situations. Sarah answered each question thoughtfully, drawing on both her formal training and her practical experience to explain her approach to complex problem-solving. What Sarah didn't realize was that her performance had triggered interest from military personnel who specialized in identifying candidates for elite special operations units. Her combination of tactical innovation, leadership under pressure, and analytical capabilities had marked her as someone with potential for assignments that went far beyond conventional military roles. After the debrief concluded, Captain Rodriguez approached Sarah privately and informed her that her performance had been exceptional and that she would likely receive opportunities for advanced training that were normally reserved for more experienced personnel. He explained that certain military specialties required the kind of innovative thinking she had demonstrated, and that her academy performance suggested she might be suited for roles that demanded both intellectual flexibility and operational excellence. Sarah was both thrilled and overwhelmed by this recognition. She had entered the academy hoping simply to serve her country with distinction, never imagining that her unconventional background might actually be an advantage in certain military contexts. The possibility of joining elite units that tackled the most challenging missions was exciting, but also somewhat intimidating given the standards and expectations involved. Returning to the academy for her final year, Sarah found that her reputation had been transformed by her summer training performance. Fellow cadets who had previously viewed her as an outsider now sought her advice on tactical problems and leadership challenges. Instructors treated her with a level of respect usually reserved for upperclassmen, and her class ranking reflected her emergence as one of the academy's most promising graduates. However, the most significant change was in Sarah's own confidence and sense of belonging. She no longer felt like she was trying to prove herself worthy of acceptance by her peers and instructors. Instead, she had developed the quiet assurance that came from knowing she possessed unique capabilities that were valued by the military establishment. The final semester brought advanced coursework in strategic planning and joint operations, subjects that built directly on the tactical skills Sarah had demonstrated during summer training. She excelled in these classes, often contributing insights that challenged conventional wisdom and opened new avenues for discussion among faculty and students. As graduation approached, Sarah received confirmation that she had been selected for a specialized training program immediately following commissioning. The program would prepare her for assignment to units that conducted sensitive operations requiring the highest levels of tactical proficiency and strategic thinking. The selection was based not only on her academy performance, but also on psychological evaluations that had identified her as someone capable of operating independently under extreme stress. Graduation day itself was a celebration of everything Sarah had achieved during her transformation from construction worker to military officer. Rosa had traveled from Phoenix to attend the ceremony, tears streaming down her face as she watched her granddaughter receive her commission and the recognition of graduating third in her class. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came during the reception following the ceremony, when Sarah was approached by a Marine colonel she didn't recognize. He introduced himself as Colonel Matthews and explained that he commanded a special operations unit that had been following her progress throughout her academy career. Colonel Matthews informed Sarah that her combination of tactical innovation and leadership capabilities had marked her for potential assignment to highly classified missions that would utilize her unique skills. He handed her an envelope containing orders that would take her to advanced training facilities where she would learn specialized techniques used by the military's most elite units. As Sarah opened the envelope and read the official documentation, she noticed a designation she had never seen before: Shadow VIPER. Apparently a code name that would be associated with her specialized training and future assignments. The colonel explained that this designation reflected her demonstrated ability to strike effectively from unexpected positions and adapt rapidly to changing tactical situations. The transformation was complete. The cadet who had been looked down upon by her peers for her working-class background and unconventional approach to military problems had become someone specifically sought out for the most challenging assignments the military had to offer. Her journey from outsider to elite operator had validated not only her personal determination, but also the value of diverse perspectives in military leadership. Looking back on her academy experience, Sarah realized that the skepticism and social isolation she had faced had actually contributed to her development as an innovative tactical thinker. Being forced to find her own path had encouraged the kind of independent analysis and creative problem-solving that distinguished her from peers who had followed more conventional routes to military leadership. As she prepared to begin the next phase of her military career, Sarah understood that her real challenges were just beginning. The specialized training and operational assignments that awaited her would test everything she had learned and push her capabilities to their absolute limits. But she also knew that her unique background and proven ability to excel under pressure had prepared her for whatever lay ahead. The young woman who had once worried about belonging in the military environment had discovered not only that she belonged, but that her distinctive perspective and unconventional approach were exactly what certain military specialties needed. From being looked down upon as a cadet to being designated as Shadow VIPER, Sarah's journey had proven that excellence could emerge from the most unexpected backgrounds when combined with determination, innovation, and the courage to challenge conventional wisdom.